Hi everyone, Robert Peak here from the Spontaneous Dungeon Master. I want to talk to you about how I have, as a busy person, been able to overcome some of the massive scheduling woes with my fellow busy adult, professionals who want to play D&D but can't always necessarily commit to weekly games. And how I've managed to make it work in such a way that it still feels and has a lot of those great elements of the campaign. I call it flexible play. I used to call it casual play, but actually it's anything but casual. It can be intense and wonderful, and your characters can grow and develop, and you don't have to have everyone at the table every time. Basically, the idea came about when I was reading a lot about this thing called Wes March's style campaigning. And elements of Wes March's I really liked. Elements of Adventurers League I really liked. I wanted the experience of anyone, anytime, right? So out of a pool of possible people, which is kind of the Wes March's idea, groups can assemble as and when. They have their characters, they bring their characters, they may even have more than one character that they can mix and match and play with. But unlike Adventurers League, where yes, your character is progressing, but there's not necessarily a huge sense of continuity if you're jumping around to different friendly local game stores or whatever, in terms of the bigger arc of the world, I wanted that bigger arc. I wanted that experience that you get in a campaign where your characters grow and develop, where the world is living and vibrant all around you. And I found a few key things go a really long way toward making this flexible play approach work. First of all, just like Wes March's, it's driven by the players. So we use Doodle. We all go out and just say, who's available when? If there's a quorum, if there's enough people who want to play, they organize and come to me and say, hey, are you still free? Usually the answer is yes. And I know who's going to play that evening. And I can prepare what's essentially a one-shot. Right? Every one of these needs to be reasonably self-contained because they've all got to get back home before bedtime. The ultimate thing is they've all got to complete the adventure within however many hours we have set aside that evening. And then the next adventure may be a totally different configuration, a totally different composition of players. So that's a challenge. It's a wonderful challenge. I've been doing a lot of one-shots lately. I've come to love them because there's a sense of completeness within the unit, but also you can do a lot to create a sense of continuity and arc across the different one-shots as well, and that can be really fun. The first thing, one of the biggest things that's helped, that's gone a long way, is that in every session we appoint 3 key roles for the players: the reporter, the cartographer, and the treasurer. Again, I talked in a previous session about how I really like to do kind of, rather than bird's eye, the player's eye view. So the cartographer, that's obvious, they're kind of making a map and helping the rest of the party understand a little bit of the top-down view, but they may have an imperfect understanding of that. The treasurer, that's just called what's the shared loot. We divvy it up kind of 3 ways at the end, or haggle over email how we do it, or whatever, between sessions. The most important, or the most interesting, I think, role is the reporter. Now, originally, this was a person taking copious notes to try and accurately and objectively tell what happened in the session, which we post up to a forum or circulate on email to share with the whole group. So those that didn't make that particular session still are clued into what happened, because there may be key plot points in the larger arc of what's going on, that evolved. And certainly we're going to build next time on what happened last time. What we found, though, is it started to feel like homework. And one of my things is D&D should not feel like homework. Going away and having to give the blow-by-blow account of all the combat and all the things and try and figure out the spelling of the names of the people of the whatever was boring. And people resisted doing it. It took them a while to post it and whatever. So what we came up with is, don't do it that way. Report in the voice of your character, as though someone sidled up to them in the tavern and said, hey, what happened with that adventure you went on the other day? What was up with that? And they're just giving their own account through their character's voice of what their character kind of thought happened, their own point of view. They're not trying to be objective. They're not trying to be perfect. Some characters are incredibly terse. It was just like, yeah, we went and killed a thing. It was great. We collected our money, right? The mercenary is going to have a few sentences, whereas the pompous, loquacious cleric might go on and on and on about what happened, particularly pointing out the places where he shined, right, where he shone. So. It gives each player that's taking the reporter role the opportunity to do as little as much as they want, and having these incomplete, reportages of what happened, I think, is incredibly interesting for the story and incredibly powerful, because that's kind of real life. If you missed out on that adventure, you're going to not get the objective account. You're going to get someone's story about what happened, and you're still going to glean interesting plot points, interesting things, but through a particular lens or filter. And if you know that character, you're going to get a whole nother level of information about the character alongside information about what happened in the session. So this is the big thing that creates arc, that creates continuity, is everybody's clued in, but they're clued in an imperfect sort of Faulknerian sort of, first person unreliable narrator kind of way. So that's been a ton of fun. Another element, and again, I may talk a little bit more about these kind of in detail in other sessions, but another key element has been what I call Act Zero. So I used to start these one-shots with, you're in a tavern and someone comes up to you and offers you a job. And frankly, some of the characters, would kind of go, well, my character, I don't know if they would want to do that job. I don't know if they're interested in that. I don't know, whatever, right? And there is that element of the social contract, but also there's that element of, we're starting at the beginning. And frankly, it's way more fun to start in media res. It's way more fun to start with, okay, you're looking out over in the expanse of this horrible swamp. The dwarf that drove you there on the cart, 3 days journey outside of Waterdeep, is, smoking his pipe and saying, look over there, that's where the lights first appeared. Now flash back to Act Zero, where your patron is giving you the assignment to go and find, his lost niece, who the dwarf lost in the swamp, a week ago. And then you ask the players, hey, so how did your player respond to this? Why did your character respond to this? Why did they want to go on this particular mission? What was in it for them? There might even be a little negotiation at that point, but they're invested already. They're already there. We've decided the adventure begins here. We're going to do a little bit of flashback about how we got here, and then boom, right back to the action, right back to a start that's engaging and that gets everyone off and running. Roll for initiative or make an ability check, or there's the lights. It's happened. Go. Right. So Act Zero has been huge to be able to set up a session that is basically a one-shot and to get right to the action and to get things going. Another important thing to help with the continuity, so that's about the unit, but the continuity of units, is to track the passage of time. So far, we've had sessions where there have been time travel, things like that, and just knowing how many days have elapsed. Also, for those players that want to engage in downtime activities, gives them that opportunity. How long has it been, or how long is it going to have been before the next session, so that I can know kind of what my character might have been up to. So tracking the actual passage of time, I use the Dale Reckoning calendar in the Forgotten Realms because that's where we're set. And letting them know, it's still winter, but it's starting to be spring or whatever it is. Another element, and I want to talk about this more later, is the hero's journey, working with players on the idea that they're not necessarily only going to level up, but they may grow as characters. Their characters may grow, may change, may need to change in order to confront to have some of the things they want, to achieve some of the goals, to confront some of the bigger obstacles. They may start out with certain flaws they need to correct. They may have certain, idealized hopes that are going to be dashed, whatever. So having a character arc alongside continuity makes it feel a lot more like a campaign. Finally, the last thing I do is I just issue rumors and notice boards. There's an adventurer's notice board outside the yawning portal, and rumors that circulate. So they're going to get rumors in between these sessions during their downtime, whatever, and that's going to stimulate them to want to say, hey, I want to pursue this next session. And that's great for me. That's spontaneous, dungeon mastering, is getting a few ideas. And sometimes I've gotten ideas from different players that seem contradictory or conflicting, and that's been a great challenge. Like, hey, how do I weave these together? How do we do time travel and interplanar horror? How do we make those things come together? How do we make these different elements happen? And that's been great. So giving the players a sense of continuity, that the world is moving. Also some kind of story beats. I'll talk a little bit more about what I call potentially about the five sort of W's of a countdown timer and how that can be used in a session, but also this bigger idea, right, of the fronts and portents kind of thing, where stuff is happening in the world and you're going to get signs and signals of those bigger movements and shifts. Whether you choose to engage with that or not is part of the open play, flexible play approach. But what I love about this is, I'm pretty much getting to play reasonably regularly, but with different configurations of people. They're getting the continuity of knowing what happened and getting to fit in with that world. I'm getting to give them a kind of world that seems living and moving on and growing and expanding and happening in the meanwhile. And we're kind of getting, I think, the best of both worlds between the campaign style play and the straight up one-shot style play. So that's how I'm doing it. Again, there's a lot here that I just want to give an overview of because I think this is I've hit on something that certainly really works for me as someone that's busy, as someone that wants to sit down and play a session, but play reasonably quickly, but also not lose that great stuff that comes from the campaign. So That's me. It's eliminated our scheduling headaches and woes and problems. You no longer have to sign a blood oath that you're going to be there every single week. Otherwise, you're letting other people down. It's called as and when, as much and little as you want to play, anytime, anywhere. Flexible Play D&D.